The cantina on Vega Station buzzed with the usual mix of alien chatter and clinking glasses. Smoke from various worlds drifted through the air, creating a haze that made everything look slightly unreal. In a corner booth, 5 of the galaxy's most notorious mercenaries gathered around a holographic display showing their next target. ZYXTAR, a towering Cronin warrior with 4 arms and scars covering his blue-scale hide, slammed his massive fist on the table. This job pays more than our last 3 contracts combined. The hegemony wants this facility taken intact, which means precision work. Valera, a sleek Zephyrian assassin with silver skin that shifted like liquid mercury, leaned forward. Her voice carried the musical quality of her species, but her words were sharp as razors. The target is a research station in the Outer Rim, heavily defended, but nothing we haven't handled before. The third member of their group, a cybernetic-enhanced Corvin named Blix, interfaced directly with the hologram through neural implants. His mechanical eye whirred as it focused on the display. Automated defense systems, patrol ships, and a full garrison of Coalition Marines. We'll need at least 8 specialists for this operation. Quindu, an insectoid Thraxian whose mandibles clicked thoughtfully, gestured with one of his 6 limbs. I have contacts. There are 3 freelancers available immediately. But for the 8th, his compound eyes glittered. There's a human. The table fell silent. Then ZYXTAR burst into laughter, a sound like grinding stone. A human? Those soft-skinned primitives barely made it to their own moon before we found them. What could one possibly offer that we can't handle ourselves? Valera's form shimmered with amusement. I heard their military is a joke. They fight with chemical propellants and crude tactics. Most of them can't even survive in standard galactic atmosphere without assistance. Blix's mechanical components whirred as he accessed galactic databases. Species classification, Death World survivors, but low threat level. Average lifespan, barely a century. Physical capabilities, well below galactic standard. They've been part of the Coalition for only 50 years. Quindu's antennae twitched nervously. This one comes highly recommended. His call sign is Shepherd. The contractor specifically requested him. This sent the group into fresh waves of laughter. ZYXTAR wiped tears from his eyes. Shepherd, what kind of warrior name is that? Does he herd livestock across battlefields? Probably tends to his fellow humans like the helpless creatures they are, Valera added, her form rippling with mirth. Even Blix, usually serious, seemed amused. Perhaps he counts them to help everyone fall asleep before battle. Quindu clicked his mandibles uncertainly. The fee they're asking is substantial, more than any of the others combined. Desperation pricing, ZYXTAR declared. They know humans aren't worth much, so they inflate the cost to make it seem impressive. But we need 8 bodies for this job, even if one is dead weight. The cantina's atmosphere processor kicked in, clearing some of the smoke, and through the haze walked their 3 other recruits. A draconian mercenary with scales that change color based on his mood, a heavily armed Turonin whose rocky hide could stop most small arms fire, and a nimble Cylon whose 4 arms were each equipped with different weapons. They settled around the table, and ZYXTAR began outlining the mission details. Insertion will be at 0600 station time. The facility has 3 main sections: residential, research, and command. We need to secure all 3 without damaging the equipment in Research Block C. What about this Shepherd character? Asked the Draconian, his scales shifting to a curious orange. When do we meet our human sheepherder? He'll rendezvous with us at the staging area, Quindu replied. Fair warning. Apparently he prefers to work alone during initial reconnaissance. The Silent's 4 arms gestured dismissively. Typical human behavior. They're pack hunters on their homeworld, but they can't handle real military cooperation. As the group continued planning, none of them noticed the figure in simple gray clothing who had been sitting at the bar, nursing a drink that hadn't been touched in over an hour. He stood quietly, left payment on the bar, and walked toward the docking bays. The bartender, an old Centaurian with wise eyes, watched him go. Under his breath, he whispered a prayer in his native tongue, not for the human, but for whatever enemies would soon discover what the name Shepherd really meant in the dark corners of the galaxy. The staging area was a hollowed-out asteroid drifting in the void between star systems. Ancient mining equipment still clung to the walls, now serving as makeshift docking clamps for various mercenary vessels. The assembled team gathered in what had once been the main processing chamber, their ship's airlocks connected by flexible tunnels. ZYXTAR checked his chronometer for the 5th time. Where is this human? We should have departed an hour ago. Probably got lost on the way here, Valera suggested, her silver form shifting impatiently. Their navigation systems are notoriously primitive. The draconian scales had turned a frustrated red. Maybe we should just leave without him. 8 specialists was ambitious anyway. 7 professionals are worth more than 7 plus 1 amateur. Blix's cybernetic eye suddenly flashed blue. Incoming transmission. Unknown vessel requesting docking permission. Finally, ZYXTAR growled. Put it through. A voice came through the comm system. Quiet, unremarkable, with the flat accent common to humans from the inner colonies. This is Shepard requesting permission to dock. Base 7 is clear. Granted, ZYXTAR replied. You're late, human. How to make a supply run. Be right there. 20 minutes later, the airlock cycled, and their 8th team member entered the chamber. The assembled mercenaries tried not to look disappointed. The human was utterly unremarkable, average height by human standards, which made him shorter than everyone present. He wore simple dark clothing with no visible weapons, no armor, no cybernetic enhancements. His hair was brown and short, his eyes gray and calm. You must be Shepard, Quindu said, his mandibles clicking nervously. That's right. The human's voice was steady, neither friendly nor hostile. I've reviewed the mission parameters. When do we move? Valera's form rippled with barely contained laughter. Where's your equipment? Your weapons? Your armor? Shepard looked at her calmly. On my ship, I prefer to travel light. How do you expect to assault a fortified research station with no visible gear? The Cylon demanded, his 4 arms spreading wide in disbelief. Same way you do, I imagine. Carefully, ZYXTAR stepped forward, looming over the smaller human. Listen, soft skin. We don't know what backwater contractor recommended you, but this is serious business. Coalition Marines aren't the pirates and smugglers you humans usually tangle with. Shepard looked up at the massive Cronin without flinching. I know what Coalition Marines are. I've worked with them before. Worked with them or against them? Blix asked, his mechanical eye focusing intently on the human. Both. The simple answer hung in the air. There was something in the way he said it that made the other mercenaries exchange glances. Not bragging, not threatening, just stating a fact. The Tyronin, whose rocky hide made him nearly indestructible, rumbled forward. You're awfully confident for someone who looks like they'd break in a stiff breeze. Shepard turned to face him. Looks can be deceiving. Prove it, ZYXTAR challenged. Show us what a human warrior can do. The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew this was coming. New team members always had to prove themselves, and this human seemed particularly unsuited for the work ahead. Shepard considered for a moment. Training exercise? Real combat, the Draconian interjected, his scales now a bright, aggressive orange. Non-lethal, but no holding back. Your choice, Shepard replied calmly. The Cylon cracked his knuckles across all 4 hands. I'll take him. This won't take long. The others formed a loose circle as the Cylon stepped into the center of the chamber. He was twice the human size, with 4 arms, each ending in hands that could crush steel. His species were known for their speed and coordination. They could attack from multiple angles simultaneously. Shepard simply stood there, hands at his sides, looking relaxed. The Cylon moved first, all 4 arms striking at once in a pattern that should have been impossible to defend against. Most opponents would be overwhelmed trying to track so many simultaneous attacks. What happened next took less than 3 seconds. Shepard moved sideways just enough to avoid the first strike, grabbed the second arm, and used the Cylon's momentum to spin him around. Before the alien could adjust, the human had applied pressure to a nerve cluster that sent the Cylon crashing to the deck, temporarily paralyzed. The chamber was dead silent. Shepard helped the Cylon to his feet as feeling returned to his limbs. Nice technique. You almost had me with the feint from the 3rd arm. The Cylon stared at him in shock. How did you? That move isn't supposed to work on my species. Our nervous system is completely different from yours. I know, Shepard said quietly. I've studied anatomy charts for most species in the Coalition database. Helps to know where the vulnerabilities are. ZYXTAR looked at the human with new eyes. What kind of work did you do before freelancing? Shepard met his gaze steadily, the kind that required studying anatomy charts. The implications of that statement settled over the group like a cold wind. The research station hung in orbit around a dead world, its angular architecture gleaming under the light of a distant star. From their observation position behind a debris field, the team studied their target through enhanced optics. The station was larger than initial intelligence had suggested, with 3 massive rotating rings connected by a central hub. Patrol pattern is regular, Blix reported, his cybernetic eye interfacing with their surveillance equipment. 4 ships, staggered rotation every 18 minutes. Defense grid shows standard coalition configuration. Valera's form shimmered as she processed tactical data. Guard change shift every 6 hours. Approximately 200 personnel aboard, with 57 confirmed combat specialists. The team had been observing for 12 hours, mapping every detail of the station's defenses. Their initial confidence had been shaken by the facility's size, but ZYXTAR maintained his aggressive stance. "We go in hard and fast," the Cronin declared. "Disable their communications, neutralize the patrol ships, and storm the docking bays." Standard shock assault. Shepard, who had been quietly studying the station through his own equipment, spoke for the first time in hours. "That won't work." "Excuse me." ZYXTAR's voice carried a dangerous edge. "Look at the rotation pattern of the rings. They're not just for gravity generation. The outer ring houses the primary defense batteries. If you attack the docking bays, they can bring those guns to bear on your ships within 30 seconds. The draconian scales shifted to an interested yellow. "You have a better idea, human?" Shepard manipulated his scanner, highlighting different sections of the station. "Research Block C is here in the middle ring. The data we need is physically isolated from the main computer networks. Old security protocol. We need someone inside to access it directly." "How do you know their security protocols?" Quindu asked, his antennae twitching with curiosity. Shepard didn't answer directly. "The maintenance shafts connect all 3 rings. Someone small enough could get inside, disable key systems from within, and create openings for the main assault team." "Small enough like a human?" Valera asked, her tone suggesting she was beginning to understand. "Small enough like me, specifically." ZYXTAR studied the scans. "Even if you could get inside, the maintenance shafts are monitored. Sensors, automated defenses, security drones." "I know." Shepard began pulling equipment from his pack. Items so innocuous the other mercenaries had dismissed them as basic survival gear. A small cutting tool that looked like a repair implement. Climbing cables that seemed standard issue. A collection of small electronic devices that appeared to be nothing more than personal communicators. The Cylon, still nursing his bruised pride from their earlier encounter, watched skeptically. "Those toys won't get you past military-grade security." Shepard picked up one of the small devices and made a minor adjustment to its internal circuitry. Suddenly, Blix's cybernetic systems began displaying error messages. The device was jamming his neural implants. "Coalition Marines use similar implants," Shepard explained, shutting off the jammer. "Most security systems do too. Sometimes the simplest approaches work best." The Turonin rumbled thoughtfully. "You're talking about infiltration, not assault. That's specialist work." "Yes, it is." Something in the way he said it made everyone pause. The human wasn't boasting or trying to impress them. He was simply stating a fact, the same way he might comment on the weather. Blix ran diagnostic checks on his systems. "That jammer shouldn't have affected me. My neural shielding is military grade. Generation 4 coalition spec," Shepard observed. "Good against most electronic warfare, but it has a vulnerability in the secondary processing matrix. Takes about 15 minutes to exploit manually, but the right frequency burst can trigger it instantly." The chamber fell silent again. That information wasn't available in any public database. "How long would you need inside the station?" ZYXTAR asked quietly. Shepard considered. 40 minutes to reach Research Block C and extract the data. Another 20 to sabotage their primary systems and create your entry points. And if you're discovered, then you'll know because their alert status will change. "That's not what I meant." Shepard met the Cronin's gaze. "I know what you meant." Quindu's mandibles clicked nervously. "The insertion point would be here." He indicated a maintenance port on the station's lower ring. "But it's a one-way trip. Once you're inside, We can't extract you until after the main assault. Understand. Valera's form rippled with concern. You'd be completely on your own in there. No backup, no support, no communication with the team. Wouldn't be the first time. The simple statement carried weight that none of them fully understood yet, but they were beginning to suspect that their assumptions about humans might have been dangerously wrong. As they finalized the infiltration plan, none of them noticed that Shepard had been making small modifications to his equipment, changes that would only become apparent once he was inside the station, moving through shadows like he'd been born to them. The maintenance port cycled open with barely a whisper of escaping atmosphere. Shepard slipped inside the station like smoke, his movements so fluid and silent that the automated sensors registered nothing more than a minor pressure fluctuation. The maintenance shaft was barely wide enough for his shoulders, but he moved through it with the confidence of someone who had navigated far worse spaces. Behind him, the mercenary team waited in their ships, monitoring station communications for any sign that their infiltrator had been discovered. The plan called for radio silence until Shepard completed his mission, but the waiting was already wearing on everyone's nerves. I still say this is insane, the Waxtar muttered, checking his weapons for the dozenth time. Sending one person, especially a human, into a fortified military facility. Valera's form shimmered with nervous energy. He seemed confident enough. Confidence and competence aren't the same thing, the Draconian pointed out, his scales cycling through anxious colors. Inside the station, Shepard had already bypassed 3 separate security checkpoints. The first had been a simple motion detector. He'd simply moved too slowly for it to register him as anything more than air circulation. The second was more sophisticated, but his jamming device had created exactly the right kind of interference to mask his passage. The third had required him to wait for 17 minutes while a security drone completed its patrol cycle. But patience was something he'd learned long ago. He paused at a junction in the maintenance system, consulting a mental map of the station's layout. The schematics he'd studied were accurate, but there were always surprises in facilities like this. Sure enough, there was an additional security barrier that hadn't appeared in their intelligence, a pressure-sensitive section designed to detect anyone crawling through the shafts. Most infiltrators would have been stopped here. The pressure plates were too sensitive to fool with conventional methods, and disabling them would trigger an immediate alert. But Shepard had dealt with similar systems before. He pulled out what looked like a simple medical injector and began making careful adjustments to its internal mechanism. 20 minutes later, he emerged into Research Block C through a ventilation grate, moving like a shadow into a corridor that should have been empty. It wasn't. 2 Coalition Marines stood guard outside the main laboratory, their powered armor gleaming under the corridor's harsh lights. They were Corvin, the same species as Blix, with cybernetic enhancements that made them formidable opponents. Their helmets contained sensor arrays capable of detecting most forms of stealth technology. Shepard observed them from the ventilation system for several minutes, noting their patrol patterns, their equipment configurations, and the way they communicated through their helmet systems. Then he began to move. The first Marine never knew what hit him. One moment, he was conducting a routine security scan of the corridor. The next, he was unconscious on the floor with his armor's power systems mysteriously offline. His partner had exactly enough time to register that something was wrong before Shepard's jammer caused his cybernetic implants to cascade into emergency shutdown. Both Marines would wake up in a few hours with nothing worse than headaches and damaged pride. Their armor would require complete system rebuilds, but they would live. Shepard could have killed them both in under 10 seconds, but the mission parameters called for stealth, not slaughter. The laboratory door was protected by biometric scanners, quantum encryption, and 3 different types of motion detectors. Under normal circumstances, it would have taken a team of specialists several hours to breach it safely. Shepard had it open in 4 minutes using tools that looked like they'd been scavenged from a repair shop. Inside, rows of secured terminals hummed quietly in the low light. The data he needed was stored in an isolated system that required physical access to extract. As he began connecting his equipment to the primary research computer, alarms suddenly began blaring throughout the station. For a moment, he thought he'd been discovered. Then, the nature of the alerts became clear. The station was detecting multiple ships approaching at high speed. The mercenary team had jumped the gun, beginning their assault 20 minutes early. Shepard's expression didn't change. He'd worked with unreliable partners before. The data extraction continued smoothly even as the sounds of combat began echoing through the station's corridors. Weapons fire, explosive decompression, and the thunder of running boots filled the air, but his hands remained steady on his equipment. The download completed just as someone began trying to break down the laboratory door. Through his earpiece, he could hear ZYX Star's voice roaring orders to his assault team. They were fighting their way through the station's defenses, but taking heavy casualties in the process. Shepard gathered his equipment and moved to the laboratory's secondary exit. It was time for the second part of his mission, creating openings for the assault team by sabotaging the station's primary systems. But as he prepared to leave Research Block C, his enhanced hearing picked up something that made him pause. Footsteps in the corridor outside. Not the heavy boots of Coalition Marines or the varied gaits of the mercenary team. These were different, precise, disciplined, moving with the kind of coordination that spoke of elite training. Someone else was on the station. Someone who didn't belong to either side of this conflict. And they were moving directly toward his position. Shepard pressed himself against the wall beside the secondary exit, listening to the approaching footsteps. For individuals, moving in perfect tactical formation, their equipment making the subtle sounds of military-grade gear. Not Coalition Marines, their footsteps would have been heavier, more mechanical due to their powered armor. These were something else entirely. The door slid open silently, and four figures entered the laboratory. They wore matte black armor with no identifying markings, and their weapons were of a design Shepard didn't immediately recognize. But their movements told him everything he needed to know about their training level. Target has been here. One of them reported in a language that wasn't in any Coalition database. Data extraction completed 17 minutes ago. Another figure moved to the computer terminal Shepard had used. Professional work, minimal traces, clean extraction protocol. This wasn't done by mercenaries. Shepard remained perfectly still in the shadows, processing this new information. These weren't random security forces or competing mercenaries. They were specialists, and they'd been tracking his movements through the station. The third figure, apparently their leader, spoke quietly into a communication device, confirming Shepard presence on station. Target is active and mobile. Recommend immediate escalation to Protocol 7. The name hit Shepard like a physical blow. They weren't just tracking any infiltrator, they were specifically hunting him. This entire operation had been a setup, designed to draw him into the open. In the corridors beyond, the battle between the mercenaries and station security raged on. Through the walls, Shepard could hear X-Star's team fighting their way toward the research block, unaware that their simple smash-in, grab mission had become something far more complicated. The fourth figure pulled out a scanner and began sweeping the room methodically. Thermal traces indicate recent presence. Target moved through this area within the last few minutes. Shepard made his decision. In one fluid motion, he stepped from the shadows, his hands already moving. The first hostile went down from a nerve strike before his weapon cleared its holster. The second managed to turn toward the threat before Shepard's improvised garrote dropped him unconscious to the floor. The leader and his remaining partner were faster, their weapons coming up with professional speed. But Shepard was no longer where they were aiming. He'd learned long ago that in close quarters, mobility trumped firepower every time. "You're Marcus Webb," the leader said, his weapon tracking Shepard's movement. Former Coalition Special Operations. The Shepard of Kepler Station. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Around the galaxy, the name carried weight in the shadow communities where wars were fought by individuals rather than armies. The Shepard of Kepler Station. The man who had single-handedly evacuated 3,000 civilians from a doomed research facility while an entire hegemony fleet burned in orbit above. "That was a long time ago," Shepard replied calmly, still moving, still keeping objects between himself and their weapons. "Not long enough," the leader continued. "Command wants you alive, but they didn't specify what condition you needed to be in." The remaining hostile fired, his weapon discharging energy bolts that could punch through standard armor. But Shepard wasn't there anymore. He dropped behind a bank of computer terminals, already planning his next move. "Who sent you?" he called out, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Does it matter?" You've been off the grid for 5 years, Webb. Time to come home. Shepard's expression darkened. There was only one organization that would use those words. Only one group that would consider a coalition Black Ops specialist to be coming home to them. The sound of cutting tools echoed from the main laboratory door. ZYX Star's team had finally reached Research Block C. In minutes, they would break through, only to find themselves caught in the middle of something far more dangerous than a simple mercenary operation. Your friends are about to become collateral damage, the leader warned. Surrender now, and they might survive this. Instead of answering, Shepard began moving toward the station's primary power coupling, visible through the laboratory's transparent aluminum walls. His original mission had been to sabotage the station's systems to help the mercenary assault. Now those same systems could serve a different purpose entirely. I know what you're thinking, the leader called out. But you can't run forever. Eventually, we'll find you again. Maybe, Shepard agreed, his hands working quickly on the power coupling's access panel. But not today. The laboratory lights flickered as he began rerouting power through the station's secondary systems. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in a red glow that would make accurate shooting nearly impossible. The main door exploded inward as ZYX Tar and his assault team finally broke through. The massive Cronin charged into the room, his weapons ready, only to stop short at the scene before him. Two unconscious hostiles, two others in black armor with weapons drawn, and their supposedly helpless human teammate standing calmly beside a sparking power junction. What in the void is going on here? Sixtar demanded. Shepard looked at the mercenary team, beings who had spent the last day mocking his call sign and questioning his qualifications. In the emergency lighting, his face was completely calm, but his eyes held depths they were only beginning to understand. Change of plans, he said quietly. We're leaving. Now. The leader of the black-armored figure smiled behind his helmet. Marcus Webb, the legendary Shepard, running away with a pack of mercenaries. How the mighty have fallen. Shepard met his gaze steadily. Tell your bosses I'm still not interested in coming home. Then he triggered the charges he'd been placing throughout his infiltration, and the research station's primary systems began cascading into failure. In the chaos that followed, 8 figures fought their way to the docking bays while the galaxy's most wanted man disappeared once again into the void between stars. But now the other mercenaries understood why he'd chosen that particular call sign, and why the simple word Shepard carried such weight in the dark corners of space where legends were born.